Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 99th edition of the Frank and Stan chat. And I'm really delighted to say that we've got Mike Rotheram and Lucy Trueman, two former guests. I think, Mike, this is your third visit to the Frank and Stan chat, and Lucy, this is your second. But we're delighted to have you on what is Easter Saturday. So thank you for giving up a bit of your bank holiday, Easter holiday festival, whatever it is, today. So I take it you're all well. We've had sort of quite a quiet week, haven't we? Oh dear, what a week. The government that keep on giving for these chats anyway. So how are you, Mike?
I'm fresh back off a holiday. We've been to Fuerteventura, which was lovely, much needed. First abroad holiday since the lockdown. So I think we timed it perfectly in a way because there was no checks. The only problem was Manchester Airport and the 3-hour queue to get through security.
Oh gosh. And I hear you got cricket this afternoon as well.
Yes, I'll be diving straight up here and going, we'll see.
See, we're losing a bit of the signal because it's all due to Frank's poor signal in North Wales. But Lucy, how are you this morning?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm feeling slightly vulnerable, though. I have to say, Mike and I have had lots of coaching sessions over the last 2 or 3 years. So I'm sat here now recording a podcast with somebody who knows all my deepest, darkest confidence issues and fears. But yeah, I'm sure we'll be fine.
Great.
He's very professional and highly recommended.
And you, Stan?
Good, Mike. Come on.
How are you, Stan?
Okay, bit depressed about the way the news is being, well, what the news is at the moment. It doesn't seem to be anything positive. I can't see a light at the end of the tunnel anymore. And at one point I thought I could. And things, I do think there's now a process of just not reporting things. So, you know, for instance, COVID levels are at the highest since there was a lockdown. And that's not even newsworthy anymore. I think there were over 1,000 deaths this week, and it's not even reported. So I just worry about we're technically not in a war, but we're in a war against a country who we keep saying how they are manipulating the people by not telling them the truth, and we're in a country where I don't think we're getting the truth either.
Yeah.
And it just feels wrong.
So what's caught your eye then this week, Stan, apart from the misinformation from government and whatever?
I think as it unravels, the idea that we will send migrants to Rwanda to be, the phrase has been to be processed. So at first look, that sounds as though, all right, so they're going to go there, fill in the forms. If they're legal migrants, then they'll fly them back here. But that isn't the case. If they are legal migrants, then they're allowed to settle in Rwanda. If they're not, they'll be repopulated to their place of birth. So, in fact, what we're doing, in my view, is we're trafficking this group of people back to where they started from. We're, you know, there is nothing illegal about crossing the channel. There's nothing illegal about claiming for what's the word? Not a refugee, as a migrant to claim for asylum. There's nothing illegal in either of those two things, yet we as a country are declaring them illegal and flying people thousands of miles away and washing our hands of it. And the thing that gets to me, I think, is they've not costed it yet. They've not checked whether it's legal, but they have announced it. Now that then begins to be cynical of when have they announced it and why have they announced it this week? What else in the news could do with covering up? Can't think what that might be, but it's just depressing that these things happen and everybody takes a quick, oh, that's terrible, as I do, and then the next thing comes along and you've already forgotten the first one.
So it's worked, Stan.
Yeah, straight out of the nudge book.
What about you, Mike? What's caught your eye this week?
Boris, I think. I think it ties in with Stan's story there. I mean, it just completely. I just don't get it. I just don't get the how you can be at the top of leadership and get away with telling lies and breaking the law. It's everything. The standards of, you know, what it means to be in government and what it means for everybody else in terms of what's okay. There's the, you know, the level of the punishment versus what everybody else was kind of going through at the point in time. It was what, £10,000 fines, wasn't it, versus like a 50 quid.
Yeah. I think the issue there was just, and you know, I'm not a great defender of the government, but I think the issue there was the £10,000 fines went to those who organised the party. So I think that whether or not a £10,000 fine has gone to the organizer of Boris's birthday party, I'm not sure. But I think the reason that he just attended it meant that the fine was smaller than it would be, or lower than it would be, you know, if he'd organised it.
There has to be a link if there's 14 or more parties in the same building.
Yeah,
there has to be a link to the person who's in charge of the building.
I mean, the thing about this in terms of leadership, though, I mean, if we were to take this into an education setting, you know, I just don't know how that leader would survive within an education setting. You know, I just think that parents and staff would have no confidence. They simply wouldn't do what that leader told them to do. You know, I think that they were, and I wonder whether or not that actually is the greatest fear for democracy at the moment. You know, that actually we're being sort of harangued or forced to do things. You know, that I've already seen reporters on television say, well, you know, well, can we believe this? You know, you say this is happening. For example, the Rwanda thing. Is this actually going to happen? Well, yes, it is going to happen. Yeah, but actually, you know, we're hearing this from a law-breaking prime minister. That's what I heard yesterday. You know.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be the first occasion, actually, because you obviously had all the stuff with Brexit, didn't you, initially, when they were going to, I think it was break one of the protocols or the treaties, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
So it's not the first occurrence either. So I just, I don't see how, I just don't see how he can continue. Speaking to Stan offline earlier, I think it would be interesting when you get the local May elections, and hopefully there's a strong message sent in them.
Yeah.
Well, linking it to schools, Frank, I spoke to our colleague Dave about how would that play out in a school, you know, and he was saying it'd be about whether governors felt that the school had been brought into disrepute, that would be the loss of confidence. So not so much, you know, I'm sure there are head teachers somewhere that have been broken COVID rules at some point. I'm not sure, but I would guess because of the numbers, there must be one or two. Whether they would be sacked because of that, I don't know. But if they'd done something that had brought the school into disrepute, or had been found to be dishonest, and the governors felt that itself brought the school into disrepute, I think they would be at risk of disciplinary, if nothing else.
Yeah, I think the thing here is that the government feel that they've got 5 years. They've got a 5-year term of office, and that means that they can actually sort of their judgment day will come. You know, and in the meantime, it feels as though they're free to do what they can get away with. You know, and I think obviously there's been some decision made here about some of these issues are so fundamental to their ideology, and I don't mean ideology in a negative way, because we've all got ideologies, but you know, to their ideology, that actually that they can't face up to the fact that actually, you know, what they were saying all along was probably pretty, you know, abhorrent, you know, and actually, but there is a group of people in our country who believe this to be the right thing to do, you know. And I mean, I know perhaps that's the problem we all have with social media, isn't it, that, you know, we get on because we all have a similar sort of view on life, you know, but actually, you know, and one of the, I know somebody said to me about Frankenstein chat is that, you know, really, Frank, you're just getting mates on here, aren't you? People that see it your way, you know, really, you know, and I get that, but actually I'm not sure I want to spend 40 minutes trying to convince somebody, you know, who thinks that sending people to Rwanda is the right thing to do. I'm not, on a Saturday morning, that's really not what I want to do, you know. I mean, for me, the staff room would be so badly toxic. I just think that the position would be untenable, and I don't think it would take very long, you know, for that leader to be moved out.
I don't think it's that easy, Frank. I really don't. Even when I spoke to Dave, he was saying, well, you know, the governors might consider a warning or something like that, but you know, I'm not sure you can outright dismiss somebody, even if the atmosphere is toxic, because you get to this thing as we've got with the government. Who reports it? If a member of staff reports it to the governors, what do the governors do? Ask the head teacher what's going on.
Yeah.
So you don't have a reporting system that allows, if you like, an investigation by somebody neutral.
But I think most of it would take a view that if one of the, I mean, I don't know, my view would be if a head teacher actually broke the law and was fined for an action undertaken, it not outside of their normal working day, but within their working day, you know, in their place of work, I think that is so damaging that actually
speeding,
I think,
Frank, somebody gets caught for speeding on the way to school. Does that count?
Well, that's not taken in the school, is it? You know,
do you know what I mean? The thing is, it's not as simple as you've broken the law. I was interviewing somebody once who withdrew when he wouldn't explain a conviction on his DBS. And afterwards, he was happy to explain it to me, but he didn't. He felt, his feeling was, if the governors didn't trust him without him explaining what that was, then it was the wrong place for him anyway. And it turned out it was a protest against animal cruelty or something that he'd been done for, but he'd got a criminal conviction, which obviously went on his DBS, but he wouldn't give details of. And then you think, well, okay, so is that enough? If a head teacher got caught doing something, you know, sabotaging a fox hunt or something like that, would you sack them?
I think the key thing here is integrity.
Yeah,
and that's the key word for me. That it's just, you can't lead without integrity and credibility, and I think that's what he's completely. It's the lies. Breaking their own rules, and again, if you've got someone, say, take that into the education setting, if you've got someone who's leading from that position, I just don't see how you can follow someone. You can't say that old quote, isn't it, Stan? Leadership's about influence. You can't influence people if
they don't.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not just trying to argue this all the way, but I've also worked in schools that are very successful not because of the head teacher, but because the deputy and the leadership doesn't lie with the head teacher; it lies elsewhere in the school.
Yeah.
And I've worked as an advisor with some schools with particularly not very successful head teachers, but brilliant deputies who've led the school basically.
So, but would you expect though? I'm not sure I would know of many senior leadership teams that would defend the head teacher if this sort of event had happened.
No,
you know, like the cabinet have with this prime minister, wheeled out day after day defending, you know, something that I think we find pretty distasteful. I can't see many senior leadership teams staying together to the point whereby they'll wheel out. They're happy to be interviewed on the television, happy to be in the radio, happy to be on in the local rag. You know, I don't think there are many like that. You know,
I think that's about hedging your bets, Frank. Because if you think as a result of this the head teacher will go, then you know I will spill the beans. But if I think as a result of my whistleblowing, for want of a better phrase, the head teacher's just going to be aware that we've complained against him, but still be in post, I think I might think again. I mean, we have got the Secretary for Education saying it's okay to have a lawbreaker at the top.
I know.
Where does that lead you to?
Yeah. Well, look, let's move off this. And the reason why Lucy's on mute is because I'm in North Wales and I'm doing the recording. And every time we bring Lucy in, there's a sort of echo. So that's the reason I don't want to give the impression that we're trying to exclude Lucy from the conversation. So normally I'd go to Mike next, but let's go to Lucy as to what's caught your eye this week. And I'll go on to mute to see if that helps. Over to you, Lucy.
Can I just say before Lucy says anything, I just say it's impossible to keep Lucy out of a conversation. I've known that for many years.
Thank you, Stan, for that introduction. Well, I know you said let's move on, but I guess for me it is the same thing that's caught my eye this week, and all three of you know that I lost my dad to COVID in the first lockdown, so the whole thing around the breaking the rules is very much through that lens. So I'm involved in a campaign group called COVID Families for Justice, and the lens that they are looking at that through is that many of us, myself included, did not have proper funerals. So my dad's funeral was limited to 10 people and I chose not to go because I thought it would be too painful. We have a massive family. To just stand there with 10 people didn't seem like the right kind of celebration of his life. So there's a lot of people, literally tens of thousands of people, that have lost somebody that in that really raw, crucial moment of saying goodbye had to follow rules and now know that people at the top were not following those rules. Which is painful. That's a tough pill to swallow. But I think in terms of, I do see a link actually between, Stan, what you were talking about at the start of the call and what we were just talking about is how can this happen? How can you lead with that integrity? And I personally think that there is a deliberate tactic. And when you do watch the news, and I don't watch the news very much for this reason, a lot of stuff is framed in very emotive language and is designed to elicit a response from us. And actually, if you are pummeling people, it isn't a school, is it? It's not the same setting at all. And it's in effect a popularity contest. So if you are pummeling people with messaging that the world is not safe, it's not secure, your cost of living is going up, everything is scary, then actually the Prime Minister telling a lie about a little party doesn't seem like a big deal, which then makes it very difficult for normal people, which it will be normal people that have to topple this. It won't be, conversations of the people in power. It's actually just not that important because the world is so scary and so overwhelming that you're just clinging on for dear life. And I think that's why they get away with it because, and you add to that the last few years of a long kind of history of politicians can't be trusted, they're all liars. We've been having these seeds sown that we're almost just like, well, it is what it is now. So I think it's quite difficult to transfer that situation into something that's much more controlled, where you have more governance and you have people that actually are responsible for making decisions about leadership, like your governors and your parents and so on. I don't think it's the same situation, and that's what scares me. I think it's that, and exactly what Stan said, that we're not really seeing the whole true picture when we watch the news. We're seeing a set of things that are designed to make us feel a certain way, and without getting to conspiracy theory, that's what I find quite dark, and that's what makes it feel a bit hopeless. I should have lifted it, shouldn't I? You should be relying on the woman with the crazy hair to lift things up a bit. I'll go back on mute.
That's really interesting, Lucy, because I spoke to a former pupil who's now a head in Lancashire, and he spent quite a long time teaching in Hong Kong. And he said when he came back to this country, he couldn't believe how depressing the news was, that he couldn't watch it. It was making him physically ill because where he was in Hong Kong, the news was always the positive side of things. It was always saying how much better things were. And he said it really hit him hard when he watched the first news. Have I disappeared there? Oh, God, a minute.
You're still there, Stan.
I'm still here.
Yeah, you're still there.
Sorry, my screen just covered with all Microsoft updates for some reason.
Right. Well, I'm thinking here, Mike, what's caught your eye then? Is it all of this sort of stuff as well, isn't it? We've been down this road, haven't we?
Yeah, it is all this stuff. I think Lucy's point is very, very perceptive. I think, you know, as you were talking there, Lucy, I was thinking you're so right. It's like the shift of perception and getting people to see the world through the frame that they want to see the world through. It's almost like deflect from the you know, the bigger issue, and say I think it's so clever in terms of what they've done, very manipulative, which again you can see right through.
The Michael Fabricant comments this week play into that, don't they, as well? You know, that in a way I thought we might talk about that, but actually listening to Lucy and you, Mike, I'm thinking, no, we don't want to give that mileage, because actually that was just a diversion from the truth. You know, that actually he was suggesting that, well, you know, what the Prime Minister did was no different to what a lot of teachers and nurses did by having little drinks in the staff room or in their restrooms, you know, at the end of the day. And you know, but again, that plays into the points that you're making here, isn't it? Really, that deflects, like the Rwanda issue, just deflects away from the most important issue. And actually, I suppose Michael Fabricant, you know, people, you know, I was really quite shocked at the comments there, because it was a slur on the profession. I don't think the profession or those professions deserve that, bearing in mind what they've had to endure over the last 2 and a bit, you know, years. I just think it's just totally irresponsible comment, but it did it, didn't it? The fact that we're giving it time now, yeah, okay, that's less time to talk about the real issue.
Yeah, but you'll remember as a head, Frank, the first job in the morning was to clear all the empty bottles out of the staff room from the night before.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, one of the things one of the things I wanted to talk about was yesterday. You know, when I think the joy of grandchildren for me was that yesterday we're in North Wales. There was a lovely evening. So at about 6:30, we went down to an empty beach, and our 3-year-old granddaughter ran into the sea with her Wellingtons and her coat and everything on, fell over, didn't feel the cold. I felt the cold as soon as I put my feet into the water. I thought, oh my goodness. But she, you know, she's a buoyant, happy 3-year-old. And Mike, we spoke, the first chat we had was about how your daughter was coping with the first set of lockdowns, and seems to have come through that. And I think India is going to be the same, you know. But Philippa, her mother, who's been a guest on here as a year 2 teacher, and she said to me this week that, you know, there are some young children exhibiting very disturbing behaviors, you know, that actually when you're only 6 or 7 and you've had over 2 years of this disruption, you know, where you're in a sort of family setting which isn't as sort of supportive as we would all want it to be, the impact of that is now being felt in these classrooms. And actually, you know, for her, you know, she enjoys the teaching, but actually this is not all, and it's a very important point she was making, it's not all, but the impact of a small number of children and their sort of their challenges, the challenges they've had over lockdown, are really spilling out onto the experience. It's not the behavior of the others, it's the experience the others have of learning in the classroom. And really, you know, at the end of the day, in a way, mental health issues like this is just about, to me, this is about, you know, parenting, poverty, all of that sort of stuff playing out. And we're seeing the impact of this now. And this is going to be in the system for many, many, many years, you know, unless there's a significant investment in additional resources, you know. And that's just about people. That's about qualified, skilled people being able to, you know, to support these young children as they go through, you know. So I think that for me, it was just the fact that I was really struck with the point you made, Mike, about your daughter. I could see that in our 3-year-old granddaughter, but I could also see the point that Philippa was making, you know, about how difficult it is to teach, you know, children that are not where it's not where they ought to be, but they're not settled. They're not into a normal routine. They've missed so much of the normal socializing that you get from school. that they haven't had that at home, and you can feel it now.
I think early years practitioners are saying similar things, Frank. I don't think she's alone in saying that, because if you take a 3 or 4 year old, they've not experienced anything that a normal 3 or 4 year old would do by the age of being 4, because they've not had those settings to be able to go to on a regular basis. So I mean, I do think it sort of pushes the nonsense of us trying to test and examine in the same way that we've done previously, you know, and he says it takes some kind of measure of how then, but you do that on sampling. You don't have to test a whole generation. You can sample some schools who would agree to do that. I just think it's a lack of acknowledgement of we keep there's a problem. We're paying for tutors. It's not a learning problem. It's an experience problem for me. It's a cultural problem. It's more than well-being. It's having a view, a picture of behaviour, of how we respond to each other, of how we socialise. And for some children, they've missed 2 years of that experience, and that takes a lot of fixing. Not a tutor.
Yeah, I agree.
It does, and again, I think the other side, just from some of the schools, I kind of visit round working with, and it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I don't know if this is the case, but I'd be interested thinking about, say, I think the word you used there was poverty. There's a link there with you know the parenting, and you know the stability and the relationships that, you know, maybe my daughter's had, and the stability in that versus somebody else, and from another kind of upbringing. You know, the school is often the safe haven, isn't it? With where they can learn a lot of those relationships and those skills. And if they haven't had that, and they've been out of that for a couple of years, then they haven't necessarily learned the boundaries and how to manage their emotions, and say all those things are kind of, you're playing catch up with those now, aren't you?
Yeah, Lucy, I'm trying to bring you in here. I mean, are you hearing senior leaders with similar sort of concerns?
Yeah, definitely. And even in my own family, you know, conversations of I don't have children, but I'm at an age where all my cousins do, and we all got together a couple of weeks ago, and even just really simple things like some of the kids in the family don't know how to swim, because they've literally not been swimming for 2 years, and that was the age that they were at where they would normally have gone to swimming lessons and so on. So I think it's really wide reaching, and I'm totally with Stan. I think it's an experience thing, because there's a lot of children that have missed out on a lot of social experiences, practical experiences, and I don't know of a quick way to catch that up, but it's certainly not through pummeling them to do better at learning, although, you know, in a more traditional sense. But, you know, without kind of reliving the first conversation we had, I think we've got to look at what the government deems to be important, and I'm not sure that they value that experiential kind of things for kids. I think they value results and hard and fast answers, and again, probably because a lot of people are coming from that more privileged background where they have been able to give those experiences to their children during lockdown. Perhaps there's just a lack of awareness for the families that haven't been able to. But certainly that is something that I've seen, and something that when I've been working I work in local government a lot, it is a concern of, you know, that gap is getting bigger and bigger between the kids that are from families that have been able to cope well during this, and the kids of families that haven't. But I also think it's not just kids. You know, we're focusing on children, and actually, you know, young people that have entered the workplace. You know, there are a generation of young people that maybe have left university during this time and got their first job in a remote sense, that, you know, are struggling to probably learn office politics, for want of a better phrase. And, you know, it's all ages this is affecting, and I think it just needs a little bit of thought as to how we get around that. And in some ways it won't be a bad thing, because in in my business, certainly, we are remaining a remote business. We do some face-to-face client work, and we do meet up once a quarter as a team. We're meeting up in Birmingham this week. But, you know, we want to recruit people that are comfortable with that way of working. But it swings and roundabouts, and it's different things in different industries. And I think it just needs a bit of reflection from everybody, really.
Is it a bit of understanding we need as well, so that we recognise that if we talk about young people joining the workforce, that they may need, for want of a better phrase, the corners knocking off. You know, they may need somebody to mentor them a bit more than they've previously needed. They may need to know what the right way to behave in an office is, as opposed to you know, being as you've been throughout school, or what your last experiences have been. I don't know. It's just whether we've got the time and the costing to do that.
Right. Okay. Well, it's been a pretty. I'm conscious of Mike having to drift off as well. So, and I'm conscious of the fact that we have had sort of quite a. Well, there've been a number of sort of negative aspects to this conversation, but I think just to be fair to us, that and picking up on some really interesting points that have been made, that, you know, the news is full of negative stuff, you know, and we've got to be mindful of the fact that we must sort of try and rise above it. What I was reading, just to finish it off, because we've got Andy Hargreaves next week, and I've been reading his latest book, and he talked about child-centered education hasn't actually disappeared, it's just gone undercover, you know, and that actually, you know, that these views will come back again, you know, so, you know, this is cyclical. And so in a sense, you know, it may well be that we end up with, it may be that we end up with a different government with a different tint and a different perspective. Even if it's even if it's the same color, I suspect it might not be quite what it is at the moment. At least I hope it isn't. But for me, it's just this sort of sense of everything being undercover. It's just quieting down a little bit, but it will resurface, you know. So in that sense, there's a sort of sense of positivity. I think about what Andy's trying to put across as well. So thank you all for joining us on an Easter Saturday. I'm sorry about the signal. I think we managed to get through most of it, and I'll do my little bit of editing to try and make it appear even, you know, as if there were no sort of glitches. There were very few, but I'll try and strip those out. So I hope it hasn't affected anybody's viewing or listening. And thank you both again, Mike and Lucy, for joining us. And Stan, we're on 100 next week. So 100 now. And we could have, Mike, got onto the Joe Root situation with him after 5 years standing down, a man who looked as though he's given his all. He really looked shocked. He looked completely shocked when I saw him on television in the West Indies, you know, just looked broken. And there is a time, isn't there, I think, when you need space for yourself and, you know, to move on.
Yeah, I think it's the right call. I think it's the right call. Just who they give it to next.
Well, just to link it in then, but that's actually what a lot of the government are saying about they don't quite like the Prime Minister, but actually who else is there? And I think the England cricket team is probably in the same situation. But anyway, thank you all for joining, and enjoy the rest of the Easter break. And we'll see you all soon, certainly for the 100th.